Welcome everyone. Welcome to Future Ready Alumni Black Box Conversations. I'm Ika Azwa Muzamal, ISKL alum from the class of 2007, and I'm currently working at ISKL as the Director of Talent and Culture. It is such a pleasure to be here today and such an honor to be your host. So each episode of Future Ready Alumni Black Box Conversations will explore a different study and career pathway. And we'll be speaking to our ISKL alumni from all over the world and spanning across all sorts of time zones today so that they can provide their insights into what it's like to study or work in their particular field. And you know what? While we've got them here, we'll also ask them to dish out some handy tips for our ISKL students who may be heading off to university very, very soon. So today's field of choice that we'll be diving into is law. And we'll be exploring some pertinent themes such as career pathways or what it's like to be in this field in reality, and also what might the future of the industry look like to all of the panelists here. And so without further ado, it's my pleasure to introduce our esteemed panel who's joining us in the Black Box studio today. First of all, we have the pleasure of hosting Professor William Birdthistle from the class of 1991. Professor Birdthistle joined the Faculty of Chicago-Kent in 2006, and his research explores the areas of investment funds, executive compensation, and corporate governance. Previously, he worked for 5 years at Ropes & Gary in Boston, where he was a corporate associate in the investment management practice. He worked primarily on matters involving mutual funds and hedge funds, focusing specifically on governmental investigations into allegations of malfeasance in the mutual fund industry. Prior to that, he served as counsel of record on multiple amicus briefs to the US Supreme Court. So Professor Birdthistle is a graduate of Harvard Law School, where he served as managing editor of the Harvard Law Review. He received his BA summa cum laude in English and Psychology from Duke University in 1995. Welcome, Professor Birdthistle. Thanks so much for joining us today. We also have Maggie Casey from the class of 2014. Maggie is currently in law school in the University of Ottawa. In the third and final year of her program, Maggie secured an articling position for when she graduates with Mann Lawyers LLP, which is a firm in Ottawa. Her experience thus far is in public interest work in family, employment, and human rights law. And it's so great to have you with us too. And joining us from all the way from Manchester in the UK, we have Hannah Costley from the class of 2012. Hannah attended university or went to law school in the Netherlands and is a fully qualified solicitor in the United Kingdom since November 2019. She studied for 5 years and trained for 2 years, and it's been a long journey, but she finds it ultimately so rewarding, and I'm sure we'll be hearing more about that in just a bit as well. So Hannah is currently a criminal defense lawyer in the UK, and she has recently been headhunted by a new firm to develop their new criminal defense department. So thank you, Hannah, for making time for us today as well. We also have Sabrinne Gibson joining us from the class of 2011. Sabrinne has worked at the University of Michigan for almost 2 years and was just recently appointed as a senior investigator in the Equity, Civil Rights, and Title IX office, where she investigates allegations of civil rights discrimination, sexual and gender-based misconduct, and Title IX misconduct from faculty, staff, and students at the University of Michigan. Prior to that, Sabrinne was heavily involved in labor and employment law at the University of Michigan Hospital, where she served as labor relations advisor. Sabrinne started law school in 2016 at the University of Toledo and graduated in 2019, then passed the bar later that year and was sworn into practice in January 2020, which is such a great run for you, Sabrinne. So it's so great to have you with us. And last but not least, we have Jonathan Ross Silva from the class of 2014. Jonathan was most recently a legal associate in the financial services team at Schern de Lamont & Co., which is one of the oldest law firms in Malaysia. Before that, Jonathan worked in a variety of roles across different fields, including equities, legal, food and beverage, and technology. After leaving Schern de Lamont just last month in October, Jonathan is currently studying an online business course with Harvard Business School Online to broaden his horizons beyond law. Jonathan is a graduate from the University of Reading, where he attended from 2014 to 2017. He went to bar school and also has a master's in legal practice from City University of London and was called to the bar of England and Wales and Malaysia in November 2018 and July 2021, respectively. So welcome, Jonathan. It's great to have you here, and welcome again, another warm welcome to all our panelists. We're so privileged to have such a varied group of speakers today, because law really is not a one-size-fits-all type of career and professional pathway. So we're looking forward to hearing all that you have to say and all of your experiences, such varied experiences from all different parts of the world as well, for our students and for our audience. So perhaps maybe on that note, maybe let's take a step back and take a look at how each of you had arrived at your decision to pursue law in the first place. And maybe we can go in reverse order this time. Maybe Jonathan, maybe we can start with you and then we'll move down to the rest of the group. Jonathan, I know you have some family members who were lawyers themselves. I wonder, did that influence you at all in your decision to go to law school and pursue this as a career?
No, not at all. The only thing, it was probably one of the things that you think about saying, oh, well, look how they are working, and maybe it's not for me. I decided to go to law school because I looked at the activities that I enjoyed at ISKL. So I did like MUN, and then I did debate and forensics, and I looked at the classes that I enjoyed, which was like English and history and econs and more of the social sciences. And then from there, I said, well, I think law would be the best fit for me. And then in terms of picking how that played out, I knew that as a Malaysian, if I wanted to have the option of coming home at some point, then I needed to go to the UK because it had the most transferable jurisdiction and law degree. And so that's how I ended up studying law at the UK.
Brilliant. Thanks, Jonathan. And Sabrinne, similarly, I know you have close family member actually who is a lawyer himself. Did you find yourself in the same situation as Jonathan? It was actually more of a deterrent at the end of the day.
I found that it was the opposite. So my brother started law school and he was going to law school in the UK. And so I had a number of conversations with him about why he chose to do law and how he got into law school and how he found the admissions process. So I hadn't actually decided where I wanted to go, and it was him who kind of convinced me to go to law school, and I decided to go to the US because that's where I was at the time. And I figured, let's just take the LSAT, see what happens, and go from there. So my brother was a huge influence on my decision to go to law school.
That's brilliant. And Maggie, I know you've had a completely different take. So interestingly, no family member in the legal field. So this was a complete departure from the so-called norm. What was the factor that made you decide that, yes, this is what I'm going to do and this feels right for me?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny, like the family profession almost feels like ISKL. ISKL was a really big part of that decision. I finished my undergrad, and like most liberal arts kids, I had an English degree and a global development degree, and I wasn't really sure what to do. So I actually wrote the LSATs in Malaysia, which is just a tip if anybody knows that. You can write them all over the world. So I wrote them in Malaysia, and I kind of just applied to see, just to see if it worked, and it did. And it kind of, the path just got set in motion.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much, Maggie. Hannah, I actually, when we talk about ISKL and all of our experiences in ISKL, we know and we hear, that there are about 3 to 4 countries that our friends and our peers are usually headed off to for university. But you actually went to law school in the beautiful country of the Netherlands. And I just wanted to know if you could tell us a little bit about, again, why law? And then specifically, why law in the Netherlands, which is so interesting?
Well, first of all, why I went into law, I think it's because I just love a good argument. It was like, how can I take arguing and make money from it? And I think that's why I went into law, and also using my ability to argue to help others. I think that's where it stems from, really. And And again, like Jonathan said, the subjects that I loved the most, I think law fit into them the best. When it comes to why the Netherlands, it's actually very embarrassing. I didn't get the IB scores that I was predicted. So I didn't get into any of the unis that I'd applied to in the UK. I was in the middle of Wales at a music festival when I got my IB scores, and I was with this random lady at a B&B crying my eyes out thinking, that's it, my future's over before it's even begun. And then my dad just messaged me going, what about the University of Maastricht? They have an amazing human rights program. And we'd spoken about it, I think 2 years prior, and I just had never applied. But then when I looked it up, he was like, let me just do the application for you. I'll put it in, because it wasn't a super long one like it is. I don't know how it is in America, but in England, it's so tedious. And within 3 hours of applying, I was accepted. So it was kind of like fate. And then from there, I did the graduate diploma in law in the UK, and then the legal practice course to qualify as a solicitor. So it all kind of, fell into place after a very, very horrible feeling of not getting your IB score. But I guess it shows that, when things go wrong, you can actually end up in a better place.
Hannah, thanks for sharing, because it really shows that, you can still get to where you want in life.
Yeah.
And life really, you can't predict it at all. And no path is really as linear as we all seem to think it should be when we're in high school. We're like, this is the next step. This is the next step. And sometimes things just don't go as predicted, and it's all right. Just go with it. Right?
Yeah, that's the biggest advice that I would give is don't worry if things go wrong, it will work out.
All right. And similarly, Professor Birdthistle, I wanted to ask, firstly, Duke University for your undergrad, and then Harvard Law School. And I just wanted to know, or we all wanted to know, was it always so linear for you? Did you always know that you were going to end up in Harvard Law? Was that your aspiration as a student?
So ISKL was kind of a different place. I mean, I think I'm certainly the oldest alumnus on this panel. And in 1991, ISKL didn't have the IB program. So one couldn't, so my scores were worse. So really the only option for me was either to go back to Ireland, which is where I was a citizen of, or to the United States, because ISKL's system was pretty good at putting people into American colleges. I didn't know much about Ireland at the time. I had never lived there, despite being a citizen, and the economy 30 years ago was much, much weaker there than it is now. So I went to school in the United States. I didn't know anything about Duke either, but the life of a child abroad is that you have to take a lot of faith in magazine listings and words of mouth from friends. So I went there, and I did not initially intend to stay in the United States. I guess I thought a little bit about law, but there are no lawyers in my family. But what was very compelling at the time was that it would allow me to stay in the country for another 3 years. I was on an F1 visa. I had 1 year of practical training. So I worked at a law firm after I graduated. And during that process, I applied to law school. I got into Harvard, and it was a pretty easy decision to want to go there. It gave me another 3 years. I needed a J1 to stay, and I did it. But no, there was nothing linear about it. It was a relatively easy decision once they had made the hard decision. But yeah, it worked out. It worked out pretty well.
Trying to apply to universities across the globe, pretty much, back in those days through magazine listings. Talk us a little bit through that, Professor Birdthistle. I mean, it kind of segues into some of the pathways that we wanted to talk about anyway, and how all of us, what was our process in getting to law school. So Professor Birdthistle, would you just explore that a little bit with us? Magazine listings, being here in Southeast Asia, originating from Ireland and then going to school in America. How did that work?
Yeah, it was a 14,000-mile trip. What I remember most about going to college at Duke was that it was exactly on the other side of the planet. And I think that was 14,000 miles. It felt a lot further then than it does today. The one thing that I remember distinctly was my parents stayed in KL just for a few months after I left. I was the youngest child. So unfortunately, I haven't been back in 29 and a half years. But what I remember about that first trip over the winter holidays was I came back from university one direction around the world and returned the other because it was equidistant. I think the world is a much smaller place now. So if you want to know about what it would be like to go to a school like Duke, or frankly, any of the other universities that the other panelists have mentioned, I think the odds are pretty good that there's probably some pretty good YouTube coverage of what it kind of feels like. You can probably FaceTime or Skype or Zoom with people who are there and get a better flavor for it. It was a real leap of faith. And it was, as I say, it worked out pretty well. I've stayed, I've become a US citizen. I got the law degree. But I think it's definitely a huge advantage today that you can really feel a lot more like you've visited the places that you're contemplating. And if you haven't, I certainly encourage you to do it. One of the things that I've done, the only good thing I think out of the pandemic has been that I have Zoomed more with ISKL in the last 6 to 12 months than I have in the previous 29 and a half years. And it's something I encourage all ISKL students to do, which is to get in touch with alumni who are at these kinds of places to ask them what it was like, what it is like. You could just walk around with your phone and show people stuff that was really impossible to do 30 years ago. And it's very hard. KL is a long way from the United Kingdom, Ireland, Netherlands, America, but that distance is a lot shorter today with technology, and I hope it's less of a crazy leap of faith for current ISKL students.
Yeah, we're so lucky in the world that we live in right now, and especially accelerated, like you mentioned, Professor Birdthistle, because of the pandemic, and now we're so used to being on Zoom and spanning across all time zones. And you're right, just reaching out to people that you trust to get real life anecdotes or real life testimonials from those universities and from their own experiences is probably the most valuable source that we have, or resource that we have here at ISKL. And similarly, I wanted to ask, because, with the influence of pop culture, throughout the ages as well, many movies have been made to show how competitive getting into law school is, and then actually being in law school itself. Legally Blonde is probably not the pinnacle of all that, but, we'll move past that. But, I wanted to ask this to Hannah, maybe what, in your opinion, does it take to not just survive, but thrive in this sort of environment, particularly just the law school environment? And what was your bumps in the road when you were in law school itself? Did you experience any bumps for yourself?
So for my experience, my bachelor's degree was in European law. That's what I studied at Maastricht. And it was very different to the UK in the sense that your first year there was the hardest year in the whole degree. To put it into perspective, there were 350 of us that started, and 3 years later, 117 graduated. So it was very difficult, very competitive. You just have to be willing to put in the work. I think it's really important, though, to find a healthy balance. I think if you just solely focus on the studying and, don't allow yourself to have a social life or join a club or even get a student job. I had 2 student jobs while I was studying, and I found that, one, it was really nice to make my own money. That was a nice thing, and also just learning social skills, which you can then transfer into studying as well as practice when you're practicing law as well. So for me, it's all about finding balance, because you don't want to burn out. You shouldn't compare yourself to others. That was a key thing too. In my friendship group alone, there were 5 of us. 2 were incredibly intelligent. I would say I was maybe in the middle, but I'm the only one in the group that has actually qualified as a lawyer. The rest of them have gone and done completely different things. So I think you just don't focus on other people and just focus on your own journey, and you'll be fine. Always
Put yourself out there to learn all sorts of new skills that can be transferable. You might not even realize it at that point in time. And Maggie, I know you're in your final year right now, and I was just wondering, what are the factors that are currently influencing, or what has influenced your choice of specialization? If you have chosen your specialization already, what was the thinking behind that?
That's a really good question. So I don't know if like people know this, but like in Canada, like for law school, you can do your undergrad in whatever you want. And then you just write the LSAT and like apply to law school, and you don't necessarily have to specialize. So you just go to law school, and then at the end you write 2 exams, a barrister exam and a solicitor exam, and you get called to the bar of whatever place you're in. So I haven't actually specialized yet, but part of what you do is after you graduate, you article, which is where you work for 10 months at a firm under somebody else's license. So you're not actually a lawyer, you're like a law student. But that's kind of the time where you get to start to figure out where you are. And then once you graduate, then you're a lawyer and you're trying to figure out what you want to do. So for me, what I've really been trying to think about is like what Hannah said, is like, what am I going to enjoy doing? Like that really matters to me. And I really came to law school with a really specific purpose of wanting to figure out how to help people. And, coming from ISKL, living overseas, like just understanding that the world is so broad and the legal system influences so much of our day-to-day lives, but so few people, myself included, understand how it really worked. So that is what interests me. And so things like family law, where you're working with people and you're helping them through hard times, or employment law, like working to make sure that like people's rights are being respected. There's a lot of discrimination that happens in workplaces, and working towards making places better and fairer places to be is what I want to do. And so figuring out how to kind of fit those things together. But it's following your interest. I'm still figuring it out, and I'm still trying different things. But that's the focus that I want to do. And that's how I've come to that, is just honoring what I really care about. And it was trying to figure out ways to like help, basically. And people who really need it and who aren't been traditionally helped, or the legal system hasn't been kind to them in the past. And how do we make it better?
Right. So really what we're hearing is that there's a couple of big decisions to make. First of all, going to law school, deciding to go down that path in the first place, and where would you like to go down and pursue that? And then secondly, when we're thinking about specialization, it's really about picking a specialization that reflects your values and reflects what you're passionate about, something that that you can do over and over again, many hours in a day, knowing that you get lots of value from doing that work. And for you, Maggie, helping people with law, like you mentioned, legal system influences so much of our day-to-day lives. Many of us don't know the intricacies of actually how much it influences us. So the value that you are seeking to reflect in your work is about helping those people who don't know it, and helping them through the process. So thanks so much for that. Jonathan, I wanted to ask, as we're talking, I know Hannah mentioned about, throwing yourself into learning social skills that are transferable, and having also, holding down 2 student jobs. Hannah, that's incredible while going through law school. I wanted to ask Jonathan, in your experience, and also in your experience going to law school in the UK, how important are internships, or getting practical experience in the field whilst reading law? And was it easy for you to find one at your law school in the UK?
I think I cannot overstate the value of internships. And I will caveat that, and I will say that I actually think legal internships have diminishing marginal returns. So in the sense that you do kind of one legal internship, and then you do maybe 2, 3, 4, but by the time you get to 5, then I think you have to start thinking about, maybe I should try to extract value from 1 or 2 really meaningful internships and really embed myself into an experience, as opposed to kind of just jumping between 6 or 7 different firms for 2 weeks at a time. But yeah, in terms of internships, I think it's really important, and I think it's important to start early. I think as Hannah was saying, you have to try and see what you like. And I actually don't think even like spending 2 weeks while you're an ISKL student is a bad idea, just to see, do you enjoy that kind of setting? And you see the way people work, and then you feel the energy of legal practice, which is so different to academics. When you do an internship, is to really try and get value from that experience. So don't just go, for like 2 weeks and then kind of pad your CV, but really try and learn about the place and the culture of an organization and an industry and a profession, especially because law is such a unique profession in so many different ways. There are so many like niches and stuff, so it's important to spend time. The other thing I would say is when I say that there's a diminishing return on legal internships is because I think it's important to follow your interest and do things that you're interested in besides law. So if you're interested in finance, then you should go and do a finance internship. And if you're interested in tech, you should do a tech internship. And I think it's easy going through law school. It can appear quite linear in the sense that like when you get to law school, your professors will tell you, okay, well, you kind of become an associate and then you become a partner at a law firm. And it's kind of like, it's a culture that kind of steamrolls through your law degree. And it's easy to kind of get swept along and lose track of the things that you're interested in. And so like Hannah said, keeping two jobs during studying is really difficult, but it's really sets you apart. Even if those jobs are like at a Starbucks, the skills you learn are going to set you apart from your cohort by an insane amount. And it's about how you sell yourself. So you can say, well, okay, I have more experience in a client-facing role than any of my other peers. Ideally in high pressure situations in small teams, in a really kind of quick environment, and that sets you apart. No internship is wasted. There's always value to be had, but like I said, if you're kind of just going from one firm to another firm to another firm for like 2 weeks at a time and just rolling through your summer at firms, I think it's more important to kind of like really sit down and say, okay, I want to spend like one summer at firm A and really learn about it, or spend like 1 month at firm A and then 1 month at a different industry and then come back to law next year or something like that. So yeah, try as much as you can and try as early as you can and try as many different things as you can and pursue your interests. That's what I would say about internships.
Jonathan, I'm gonna steal that sentence, diminishing marginal returns. I feel like that sentence is gonna be applied to many, many different things now in my life. So I love what you said though, it's not about steamrolling through your internships and just picking up practical experiences here and there. And we're not only just talking about practical experience in law firms. There's actually great value in pursuing internships and experiences out in the real practical field, because you will be advising clients in those fields. So yeah, if your interest is in tech, go intern at a tech firm. If your interest is in F&B, go intern at F&B. There's ultimately so much value in that practical real world experience before you go into a law firm, so that you know how it works when you're in that advisory position. Great, thank you so much. I also wanted to ask Sabrinne, the importance, just coming off of that, we were talking about experiences during law school, getting that practical knowledge and experience of the industry. But what about mentors? What about guiding forces? Can you tell us about a mentor or a guiding force that you may have had while studying or in your career that has impacted your journey thus far?
Sure. Yeah. So I would reiterate what both Jonathan and Hannah said about doing, internships at law school. I thought it was a great way to get experience and ground your legal knowledge with practical experience, And so that's what I did. I did a lot of internships when I was in law school. And it really helped me narrow down what I liked and what I didn't like. And so I landed in labor relations, and it was kind of a dual sort of role where I did labor relations work and I did civil rights investigations. And so that's kind of where everything started. And I worked in a very small office on campus. And they were people that I thought were instrumental to my success today. So they helped me with training. They directed me to resources. They asked me what type of work I like to do. And then they, made sure that I was getting experience in those things. And so by the end of my internship, I knew that it was ending, and it was I was actually doing it for class credit at the time. And nearing the end of my internship, they offered me a graduate assistantship so that I would get paid for the work I was doing instead of doing it for free. And so I did that for a couple years. And then by the end, I was nearing the end of my law school time, and I had all the skills I needed to apply to the exact job that I wanted. And so here I am like a year and a half later, and I'm doing exactly what I want to do. And so they were instrumental in helping me prepare for my interviews. They were helping me with my resume. They helped me, you know, with moral support. And then eventually they were helping me talk through a salary negotiation. So really, they were just super helpful throughout the whole process. And I know that if I ever have any questions about anything in this field, that they would be the experts to ask.
Yeah, so it's really about also pursuing something that reflects your values and reflects your passions, getting the right experience, but also meeting the right people who are going to open those doors for you at the end of the day. And like you said, Sabrinne, at the end of your internship and your experience, you felt that you had all the skills that you needed to apply then for your dream job, for the role that you wanted, and you felt prepared for it, and you felt that you were ready to take on that challenge. And it was all because of the people who were instrumental, who were giving you those resources, the knowledge transfer, the skills and the training to get you to that place.
Exactly.
Yeah, so it's wonderful to be able to have that mentorship and guidance throughout your career as well. And are you still in touch with them till today?
Yes, I am. We have a group chat.
That's wonderful. And Professor Birdthistle, in the same kind of length, or actually maybe we're switching gears a little bit, but I wanted to ask, through your extensive experience, in a number of specializations in the field as well, when you look back over your shoulder and think of everything that you've achieved so far, was there anything that you would have done differently now that you can kind of stand here and look back?
And so I'll offer a bit of advice that's maybe contradictory to some of what others have said. So my biggest mentors, such as they were all basically classmates at almost every stage of the way. So when I was at ISKL, so I didn't really pay particular attention to grades until junior or senior year, which meant that I really enjoyed high school. But then when I went to college, I actually took a great deal of sort of mentorship from my classmates there, because there was a guy I met there who was a really, really nice guy, and not terribly bright guy, and he did spectacular at college. And I remember after knowing him for a couple of months, I was like, what is the secret? And the secret was he just worked really hard. He got up early and did the reading, and it was kind of inspiring. It was like 7 years too late for me. Not too late, it all worked out fine, but it was, I just feel like there's a lot more I could have learned. For my own sake, I think instrumentally it sort of worked out. I got to, a good law school, and it worked, everything was fine. But I feel like I could have learned so much more. And I don't think that's really necessary for all lives or careers, but I'm a professor now. So sort of like actually knowing stuff is kind of part of the job description. And I think if I had paid more attention in, high school and probably college, I probably would know more. So those are the two lessons I have. One is school is kind of fun, and if you're not enjoying what you're taking, then switch to something you enjoy taking, and then just do the reading, and you'll be amazed at what you can learn from it. And the second is, I feel like peers can be excellent mentors because they can sort of show you exactly how much can be done, with some sort of application. So I think that's probably the lesson for me. But in fairness, things have worked out pretty well. So there's not a lot of great U-turns where I think I really should have done something tremendously different. But probably paying more attention in school would have helped.
But that is definitely sage advice, especially coming from a professor himself. And I love it that you mentioned, Professor Birdthistle, that peers can be great mentors, can be such a positive influence in your life. In fact, because we spend so much time with them in school, some people might even think that they are, or maybe subconsciously, they are the most influential people in your life, especially when you're in high school, especially when you're in school or university, because you just spend so much time with them. Yeah. So I wanted to transition a little bit. I know we were talking about law school, but I also wanted to touch on what are the realities of the job itself. what does that look like? Because, movies and series such as Suits and The Good Wife or Runaway Jury, Hannah, I know that's your favorite movie, might portray a romantic view of the profession. And maybe this goes out to Hannah first. Do you think that the rigors of law school actually prepares you for real life as a lawyer in the field at the end of the day?
I think it's more the skills that I learned, that's what I've applied, but the actual knowledge that I was meant to have absorbed, not used a bit of it. I mean, especially in criminal law, it's so practical. What you're taught is you never use it. Especially in the UK, we're taught case law, and case law changes every day. So as long as you learn the skill of how to find the case or where to find the specific part in the case that you need, those are the important things. It's not glamorous at all. I mean, I used to work at a legal aid firm before I moved to the firm I'm at now, and I was on call a lot. So if someone got arrested, I was out at 2-3 o'clock in the morning at a grotty police station arguing with a police officer. I mean, it's fun, but it is not glamorous. And I think you also have to be aware that depending on what you want to go into, I mean, if you're going into corporate, then yeah, you'll be making loads of money. Don't know how happy you'd be, that's just my opinion. But doing something like criminal law, you aren't paid very well. Or at least you're not when you start off. And it really is more a vocation than a job. It's a calling. And you have to be willing to go through the tough to get to where you want to be. My first job 4 years ago, I don't know if this will mean anything to anyone with it being in pounds, but my salary was £13,000. And that was back in 2017. So that's a ridiculously low salary. I'm pleased to say that is no longer my salary, but I had to accept that to be able to get to where I am now. So you have to be willing to do the hours, and the jobs that might seem silly, but there's a purpose for it. I always like to think you shouldn't ever say no to anything, but within your own limitations, because you don't want to burn out, you don't want to be overwhelmed. And in the same way, you shouldn't be afraid to ask for something, because the worst thing that will happen is they'll just say no. And at least then you don't live with the regret of not knowing what could have happened. So that would just be my advice. But no, it is not glamorous. I don't know how anyone else feels, but I definitely don't feel like it's glamorous at all. But it's fun. It is a lot of fun.
So at this point, I feel like those movies and those series, it's really just catfishing.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. Definitely.
They're just like luring people into law school with a promise of glamorous sports car kind of life. But really, when you get down and dirty, it's really about rolling up your sleeves. And it really, I like what you said, Hannah, it's a calling. It really has to be something where you're saying like that I really believe in the work that I'm doing, and that's what's going to get me through law school. It's going to get me through the actual career and practice itself. And I see, when you said absolutely nothing, I didn't apply anything from law school into my field. I saw lots of laughs. I saw lots of nodding from the different panelists here. Talk to us a little bit about that. Anyone can jump in. Agree, disagree. What was it like for any of you?
I'm a bit worried because Professor Birdthistle teaches in law school now. So
We're gonna. But go ahead, Jonathan.
No, but Hannah is totally right. I mean, the law changes all the time, especially in common law jurisdictions. I know very little about other jurisdictions and other legal systems, but in common law, which is like what the UK uses and Malaysia uses, I mean, the law changes like every week sometimes. Especially because I used to do financial services law, and financial regulations change ridiculously quickly. So even the things you learned last week, if you get a new client this week, you have to check it again. And so as Hannah said, it's the skills you learn in law school that are really important. It's how you learn and how you apply yourself to situations and fact patterns that I think is exponentially more valuable than the material, especially if you're going to end up practicing in like a different jurisdiction. where they have, every jurisdiction's got their own nuances. So yeah, I totally agree with Hannah. And it is not that glam. The glam jobs that pay a lot are often, there's a payoff, there's a secret side that they're not telling you.
What's that secret? That secret sauce is what we need to know right now.
Yeah, so the time Mike Ross is away from his desk is ridiculous. It's not possible.
Thanks so much for that insight, Jonathan. And Maggie, you wanted to say something as well. Please feel free to pitch in.
Yeah, I was just agreeing. I think law school, it's very it's academic. It's still very much an academic exercise, whereas the practice of law is a lot like more the practical parts. And that speaks to the conversation earlier about internships. Those are really helpful to ground you. I had to take a civil procedure class, and it was so hard because I had not worked in a firm yet or done any internships. And so all of it makes no sense. And I don't know what these things are or whatever, but if you can do an internship or something, then you're like, oh, I have to get this affidavit signed for this reason. And I have to you start to see how it all works. And it's not just a bunch of crazy rules. So that really helps. But yeah, they don't, at least in Canada, it's a pretty academic exercise of reading case law and stuff. And that's not as relevant. You also have to take, you usually will practice one practice area, but you have to take 3 years of law school and a bunch of different courses. So not every course is going to be applicable, but it's a base understanding. And then it's all about legal research. So much of law, and that doesn't get put in the TV shows, is just researching, and paperwork, so much just filling out forms. I'm also like I said, I'm still a student. So I'm a summer student and stuff. And that's all we do is mainly fill out forms and do legal research for partners. But yeah, it's a lot of researching. And so it's knowing how to, find a case, use the databases, where do you look, what matters, how do you note up a case? So is this the most relevant one? You need to know, if it's changed or it's been updated. It's all it's a lot of research, I would say, more than being in a courtroom. Although depending what you do, Hannah's probably in a courtroom a lot more than other people are because she's criminal defense. But it's a lot more paperwork than you think.
So beware of the paperwork and the number of forms that we're going to have to be filling out later on.
Yeah, unless you like it. I kind of like it. I was always, when you were traveling, we were kids and you had to fill out the landing cards. I always would take my families and do it all for them and fill it out for them. So yeah, I always liked that part of it about traveling. So yeah, it's just do you like that? I like checking a form.
So it's a big question to ask. Before we are thinking of pursuing law school, think ahead a couple of years. Do we like to fill out those forms? If yes, this is probably a career path. One checkbox in the career path for you. I also wanted to expand it a little bit more. We were talking about law school and then talking about real life experiences in the field, in the job itself. But what if we look ahead, right, and look towards the future? And this, again, goes out to anyone on the panel who would like to answer, but especially after these last 2 very strange years, knowing that COVID has impacted pretty much every industry in some way or another. How do we see the legal field possibly evolving in the future or being disrupted somehow? It might not be related to COVID, but it might be. Just wondering, do we have any takes on that, or do we have any opinions on how it might be disrupted in the future?
So I don't know how it was for anywhere else, but here in the UK, a lot of practice areas went online. So a lot of the hearings became virtual hearings. Admin was done behind the scenes rather than bringing everyone into court and wasting everybody's time. But unfortunately, that did not translate to the criminal justice system because it is such a people-oriented area of law. So only admin hearings were allowed to be virtual. I couldn't even imagine trying to run a trial with a jury over Zoom. It would be absolutely impossible. So I think for a lot of practice areas, a lot of it will go online. But at least for my own, I think it will remain very face-to-face. To be honest, though, the English and Wales criminal justice system is on its knees. There's no funding. It's horrible at the minute. I've gone into private crime at the moment, just because in legal aid it's so difficult and it's so thankless. And I know that there are less and less trainees going into criminal training contracts or qualifying into crime. So unfortunately, the ages of the solicitors are getting older, and there's no one there to replace them. So I don't know where the future of the criminal justice system is, at least in the UK, and specifically for crime. Obviously, there are so many other areas of law.
Yeah, I mean, that's so interesting because when we think of law, we think of like it's almost ageist in its being, you know. It's all these, we're talking about retrospectively all the cases being applied, and you know, we're talking about an industry that's been alive for so many decades and generations. And then now thinking about how, Hannah, you mentioned, you know, at least admin cases were taken up online. I'm hoping that saves time somewhat, and it's possibly a good disruption for the future of the field. I wonder, you know, if any of the other panelists would like to weigh in on how might the industry be disrupted in any other way apart from just the admin cases being taken online now, or do we think that the legal industry in its own way is rigid enough almost and strong enough to withstand any major disruptions in the near future?
So prior to my current position, I was working as a labor relations advisor. And one thing that we were starting to see is that a lot more people are starting to unionize because of the state that the world is in at the moment. You know, a lot of people lost their jobs, a lot of people needed assistance. And so unionizing was one way for them to, you know, protect themselves moving forward in the future. And there are a lot more groups starting to unionize. And I think that's something we're going to see a lot more of moving forward.
Oh, absolutely. Yes. You know, the unionizing of those industries, for sure. And I think there's going to be so much more because of the pandemic as well. There's going to be so much more emphasis on employment and labor laws, protecting people, and perhaps even just being kinder, and how do we stand up for ourselves as employees as well in the future. I think people are going to want to know what their rights are and how they're going to do it. And Professor Birdthistle, how about in the field of research and legal education? Any disruptions there, possibly?
Yeah, there's already been huge disruptions, at least to the United States legal market in the last 10 years. Less, I mean, obviously plenty from the pandemic. Everything has moved online. I've taught out of my basement for a year and a half. But the bigger disruption was probably in 2008 when the financial crisis hit and firms lost, or at least became very concerned about cutting costs. And one of the costs that they found easiest to cut were legal expenses from outside law firms. And so they slashed those cuts, and those cuts in turn led to a lot fewer hirings of lawyers. So I don't know the exact numbers, but there was a massive contraction in the number of students who graduated with law degrees in the United States. And I think it must have plummeted by at least 30 or 40%, which is huge in a country like the United States, which produces tens of thousands of lawyers every year. That was a very big contraction. That hurt a lot of law schools too, of course. So that was a very large disruption. I guess the good news is that going into the pandemic, America was producing relatively fewer law students than it had. So there wasn't a whole lot more to cut there. The other disruptions after that were going online. I do know that there's a lot of talk about AI being used to sort of process a lot of sort of drudge work that goes into reviewing contracts, which is something that junior associates, junior lawyers typically do. And that's not great for law students because those are the jobs that typically people begin with. On the other hand, if that work is taken over and you still nevertheless get a job as a lawyer, maybe what you'll be doing is more interesting than that. I guess, like a true lawyer, I want to connect this question to the previous one and both argue for and against Hannah's discontent with law school. So I will say that I think most people who have graduated from law school use a lot more of law school than they probably appreciate. Not necessarily what they've learned in the classroom, though I will say the following. I felt like the first year I spent at law school was the most intensive language immersion school I'd ever been in my life, because what you said and what you spoke when you came out of that first year, that 1L year of law school, was just a huge vocabulary of legal phrases and terms: French, Old French, Norman, Latin, Greek. Those are all phrases that people sort of toss off as second-year law students that they'd never really understood before. So I think there's an immersion of both vocabulary and also, as people did say, including Hannah, it's more a set of skills. How do you do the research? How do you find out the answers to the questions, and not so much the answers to the questions, which of course are always going to change. So I do think that there's more to a legal education that persists. And I'm selling legal education, so take that as a caveat. But Cicero was a lawyer too, and that was 2,000 years ago. So it's got a pretty good track record of producing jobs. And then to argue the other side of the equation, I will say I do firmly believe that it's basically impossible to produce law students who are practice ready. It's a big phrase that came out in the United States after 2008. Oh, if law firms can't get as much business, what we need to do is make sure that the law students they hire are practice ready. The idea being that they can step right out of law school and immediately start representing a client. I tend to think that that is impossible for probably this primary reason. Clients, at least in many places in the United States anyway, tend to pay something like $700-800 or more an hour for a lawyer's time. There's nothing you can learn in 3 years that's that valuable. So it takes years. It takes years and years and years. And this is true for me too. I now teach a subject that I didn't even take in law school, and I learned it entirely from working at a company and at a law firm. And it took a long, long time. It took way more than 3 years, because to become specialized enough to sell advice that's that valuable just takes a really long time to learn. And I don't think that's possible in law school. So I agree. I end up agreeing with Hannah, which is you learn a set of techniques and skills and sort of baseline knowledge about the practice of law. It's not really the content. The content, as Jonathan and others have said too, just switches. It changes a lot. But yeah, I think there'll be plenty of technological disruptions to come. But I think fundamentally the practice is going to continue as it has for millennia, because as Hannah has said, at 2 a.m., when you're looking at being deprived of liberty, the first person you're going to want to talk to is a lawyer.
Right, and that will never change. And you're absolutely right, Professor Birdthistle. Wow, just a wealth of such valuable advice there. You touched on, are we going to be, our law schools currently producing practice-ready lawyers, and whether that's even possible in the future. And from what I'm hearing, it's really about what you make of your time there at law school, the people you meet, the skills you pick up, the discipline that you're learning as well and inculcating into your lifestyle, that then sets you up for success later on beyond the walls of law school. With that, I actually wanted to transition to our last question for the session today. And it's really taking all of this in and then thinking about, is there any last piece of advice, looking into the future, looking back also on your experience, getting you all to where you are right now, achieving all the many things that you guys have achieved. What is the one piece of advice, if you could drop one piece of advice for our students at ISKL right now who are maybe thinking of pursuing a career in law, or maybe any other alumni who's also maybe in this point in their lives thinking of pursuing a career in law, what would that advice be? And perhaps we can start with Sabrinne.
Sure. So I have two pieces of advice. Mm-hmm. So the first is to ask a lot of questions. I feel like asking a lot of questions helps you figure out basically everything. And so even if you don't know enough about what you want to ask questions about, just start asking questions, and everything else will fall into place. And the second one is that I feel like when I had applied to law school and I was talking to lawyers, a lot of them told me not to go to law school and not to go into law. And so I thought that was a little bit harmful. And so if you want to become an attorney, or if you want to go to law school, I'd say just do it. It's an extremely competitive and difficult place to be, but in the end, I think it's worth it. Just reiterating what Hannah, Jonathan, and William said, that it is it is about learning how to do what you do. It's a mindset, and it's learning how to break down an issue and then, regurgitate the issue, but also like it's learning how to research, and it's a lot of different skills wrapped up into one. And so it's not just about practicing law. It's really versatile, and you can apply it to many things. So if you want to go to law school, I'd say just do it.
And any other advice from the other panels, please jump in.
I've been a lawyer for 22 years, and I think I've practiced law for fewer than 5 of those years. And so I guess the main piece of advice I would give to someone who's considering law school is to pick up the paper of record in whichever country they live, so the New York Times or whatever it might be, and take a look at the front page. And my guess is that 75% of those stories are going to involve at some fundamental level a legal question. And my advice for most people is to consider a law degree. I know it's very expensive, and I know that the career paths, may be not exactly what you want. But I have 3 children now, and they're in 8th and 4th grade. And when I think about what they might want to do in their lives, none of them wants to become a lawyer. But I think all of them would benefit from a JD, because whatever it is you want to do, understanding the rules of the game seems very important to being able to sort of succeed and to negotiate, or even just to be a better citizen wherever you live. And law is fundamentally the code that underlines the rules that makes the rest of the operating system run. So, that may not be enough to pay a lot of money and to spend a lot of time doing a law degree, or maybe even a career you don't love. But if you have the ability to add it to a program you're thinking of. So I'm also currently enrolled as a PhD student in history. And when I look at most of my cohort mates in it, I think they could probably benefit from a law degree as well, because it just helps you understand the society that you live in. And that seems very, very important for accomplishing big things in what you want to do, and also just protecting yourself as a citizen. So I think law is a very, very important thing to understand, even if you don't particularly want to become a lawyer or a classic kind of lawyer. There's a lot of other law you can practice. As I say, most of my 22 years, I haven't practiced law at all. I'm a reformed ex-lawyer, churning out new lawyers. But there's a lot of things you can do with a law degree that don't involve the practice of law, if you're willing to contemplate them.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Professor Birdthistle. And thank you, Sabrinne. Sorry, I said Hannah before, but thank you, Sabrinne, for that wonderful advice. Anyone else? Last piece of advice.
So like Sabrinne, I'd have, oh, sorry, Maggie, do you want to go? Okay. Like Sabrinne, I have 2. The first I mentioned way at the beginning, which is that you should never be afraid to go and do something. The worst thing that can happen is someone will say no, and that won't kill you. If anything, it makes you come back even stronger. I think it took me a while to get to that place where I thought I'm just going to ask for it. And if they say no, that's okay. I'll ask them why and learn from them and come back again when I'm ready. So I think that's a really key bit of advice. And my second piece of advice is more, not so much for law, but for going into any career, is that you have to make sure you love what you do, because you spend most of your time doing it. So if you're unhappy with what you are doing from 9 to 5, or depending on the job, even later into the night, every single day, that unhappiness can seep into other areas of your life and affect things like your relationship, your relationships, your mental health, things like that. So I would say just make sure you love what you do, and don't be afraid to change and switch it up if you need to. There is nothing wrong with that.
Agree with Hannah's point. I think that's totally a part of it. And I guess what I would say too about it is, we talked about how a lot of the substantive stuff of law, if you're in high school, if we're talking to current ISKL students, you can't, you'll learn that in time and in your practice area and as it comes along, but we've talked about the skills. And for me, I look around this panel and I had the awesome opportunity to be with, except for Professor Birdthistle, with all the other panelists on different clubs and on different sports teams. And we were all involved in different ways. Ross and I, or Jonathan, we called you Ross in high school, but now you're Jonathan. So that's an evolution. So I keep getting it wrong. But Jonathan and I were on the debate and forensics team, and we traveled all over Southeast Asia together. And Sabrinne was my captain in track. And those things matter, and take up the advantage to do that. There's not to contradict Professor Birdthistle, do all the readings, because that matters too. But having been through ISKL recently, it's a really academic environment, and it is very stressful, and it is really easy to lose sight of all of those other things. And I don't regret for a single second every moment I spent on a track team or a forensics team. And those are the skills and the work ethic and the drive and, learning about leadership and what it means to be part of a community member that really matters. And so don't let the stress of applying universities or grades keep you from being involved. That will make you a better lawyer, and those will give you the skills to be good lawyers down the road. And the proof is in the pudding. On this panel, all of you guys were so involved in ISKL, and look where you are now. And so I really recommend that to students. Don't quit your activities, your extracurriculars, those other things, because those are some of the most important skills that you will learn and you will get. And there's time to do reading later.
Yeah, I agree with everything that everyone said. Everyone said it so well as well. The last thing I'll just say is just try things in a legal setting, in a non-legal setting. If you're at a law firm and they say, why don't do you want to go to court? Say yes. If you want to do due diligence, just say yes. There's no experience that's wasted. If you want to try something completely different from law, like Professor Birdthistle say, a legal education sets you up very well, but you have to apply yourself, and you have to open yourself to those other opportunities and pursue them and really go after what you want. So yeah, just try different things as early as you can, as much as you can, in a professional setting, of course. So yeah, that's what I would say.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much, everyone. So really, what we're hearing right now is ask a lot of questions, because that ideally is what's going to get you further in terms of picking up the knowledge and the skills that you need. Another thing is skills. We're really talking about lifelong skills here, and like what Professor Birdthistle said, when you pick up the front paper, or when you're scrolling through Twitter these days, most of the things that you're reading is going to have some sort of legal implication. And so if you can pursue a law degree, if you can, or actually just pick up on that legal knowledge, because it's really the code of life at the end of the day. And don't say no to your extracurricular activities or your practical opportunities to pick up these life skills and then apply it to that reading that you're going to be doing and that you're going to be making time for throughout law school. And also, some people are going to say, don't go to law school. Don't listen to them. If this is something that you are passionate about, and that it's going to reflect your values, and that this is something that you can do day in and day out, and it's going to give you purpose, pursue it and go for it and take a leap of faith and jump in with both feet, and you'll be fine. So thank you all so much. It's been a wonderful session. I just want to thank all of our panelists today, Professor Birdthistle, Maggie, Jonathan, Hannah, Sabrinne. You guys have been so wonderful, and I'm sure many of our students are alumni from all over the world. They're going to be looking at this session today and feeling very inspired by all of you. And congratulations on everything that you've achieved so far in your life. Thank you so much for spending time with us today. So all the best, and we'll catch up very, very soon. We can unmute and say bye.
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 Bye.